In a bustling office on the outskirts of a busy city, a man named David sat quietly at his desk. He had been working at TechSoft for several years, keeping to himself most of the time. David was a systems administrator, the kind of guy who preferred code to conversations. His job was to keep the servers running smoothly, which was no small task in a company where technology changed as fast as the weather. The office was filled with the hum of computers and the sound of keyboards clicking away. Today, however, a sense of tension hung in the air. The CEO, a sharp and often intimidating figure named Karen, had called an emergency meeting. No one knew why, but whispers of a major problem buzzed through the office like electricity. The mood shifted, a heavy weight pressed down on everyone. David had noticed the subtle signals all day. The sudden slowdowns of the server, the strange error messages flashing in the system logs. Something was off. Most in the office would overlook these signs, dismissing them as mere glitches, but David felt a familiar flutter of unease knotting in his stomach. When issues arose, he was the one who often stepped up, though he rarely sought recognition. As the afternoon stretched on, the meeting ended and a sense of chaos erupted. Employees rushed out of the conference room, their faces flushed with worry. The network experienced a full-blown crash right after Karen's announcement about a critical project deadline looming. The phones began ringing incessantly, emails flooded in, and everywhere the panic grew. While his coworkers floundered in anxiety, David slipped away from his desk. He couldn't ignore it any longer. With his heart pounding, he walked to the server room, a small, dimly lit space tucked away in the corner of the building. This was his sanctuary where he felt in control. The faint whir of machinery greeted him like an old friend. As he stepped inside, he flicked on the overhead lights, illuminating the rows of servers stacked high. This was where the magic happened, and today it felt like the chaos outside seeped through the walls. David wasted no time, scanning the screens filled with complicated data. His trained eyes darted over lines of code and error messages, piecing together the puzzle. "Come on," he whispered to himself, tapping the keyboard with urgency as he navigated through the system. The room was silent except for the soft tapping of keys and the low buzz of fans cooling the equipment. He drew on every ounce of knowledge he'd gained over the years. Each moment felt like an eternity as he raced against time. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. He identified the root of the problem. A critical server had crashed due to an overload. David took a deep breath and started troubleshooting, working quickly and methodically. He rebooted the server, resetting configurations and rerouting data to ensure the network stayed stable. Outside the server room, the commotion continued, the voices of frantic employees rising up like a cacophony, yet inside, everything faded away. David entered a flow state, lost in his focus. In times of crisis, he often found clarity like this. He felt a mix of adrenaline and determination surge through him. This was his chance to not only fix the problem, but to prove he was capable of more than just troubleshooting issues behind the scenes. Suddenly, the door creaked open and Karen stepped in. David didn't notice her at first, his eyes glued to the screens. When he finally looked up, Karen's expression was a mix of surprise and scrutiny. Here was the CEO, the powerhouse behind the company, standing in his small domain. She asked, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "Just a server issue," David replied, finding his voice amid the tension. "I think I can fix it." She watched his hands move over the keyboard, her eyes narrowing as she assessed him. "How serious is this?" David met her gaze, his heart racing. "If I can get things back up and running quickly, we'll be fine." Without a word, Karen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and waited. The pressure mounted. David could feel her eyes on him, a heavy weight of expectation pressing on his shoulders. He worked faster, focusing on each step, praying for clarity. Repairing this issue wouldn't just save the project, it could shift their entire perception of him. A few moments later, he executed the final command. The screen flickered and the system booted up. David felt a spark of hope as one by one, the lights on the servers turned green, indicating they were alive again. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He turned to Karen and found her watching him closely. For a moment, something shifted in the air between them. It was like he'd opened a door to a new possibility. Karen straightened up, her features softening. "Well done," she said, the tension in her voice cooling. David felt a swell of pride. It wasn't praise he had sought, but it felt good coming from her mouth. Just then, the office door swung open. A group of employees, still frazzled from the earlier chaos, entered the server room, their eyes widening as they saw the lights flickering back to life. One of his fellow techs exclaimed, relief flooding their faces. As the group gathered around, Karen remained there, observing the camaraderie unfolding. People turned to David, their expressions shifting from worry to gratitude. In that moment, he was no longer just the silent worker behind the scenes, he was a hero. But then something unexpected happened. Karen stepped forward, her sharp demeanor returning. "Let's be clear," she announced, her tone firm. "We've got deadlines to meet and this project is crucial." He nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was putting him in a leadership role, even if just for this moment. "Great," she continued, making eye contact with the employees. "Work together and make sure we don't have any more surprises." With that, she left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Once she was gone, the tension broke into laughter and chatter as the team rallied, discussing the next steps. David found himself surrounded by eager faces, everyone buzzing with a new sense of teamwork. It felt good to finally be included, to be recognized for what he could do. As they plotted the course forward, David could feel a shift in himself, a rising confidence. He might have spent so long in the shadows, but perhaps it was time to step into the light. The connection with his coworkers felt deeper, their camaraderie unspoken but strong. As the hours ticked on, the group worked tirelessly. They laughed, shared stories, and even cracked jokes about the crisis they had just avoided. David shared his knowledge, guiding his team on how to keep the system running without a hitch. He was no longer just a cog in the wheel, he was leading them toward success. Time flew, and when they finally wrapped up for the day, a sense of accomplishment filled the room. Karen returned, an air of curiosity about her. She asked, eyeing the energized group. One of David's coworkers replied. Surprised by the sudden recognition, David felt the warmth spread across his face. Karen's gaze landed on him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of respect in her eyes. "It seems I underestimated you, David," she said, her tone noticeably softer. "Good work." As she left the room, the group erupted in laughter again, celebrating their small victory. David felt a sense of belonging wash over him, diving deep into the satisfaction of teamwork and success. For the first time, the office felt like home, a place where he truly belonged. Days turned into weeks, and with each one, the project grew steadily closer to completion. David took on more responsibilities and began to lead meetings. His coworkers turned to him for advice, and he found joy in sharing his knowledge. The quiet guy from the server room had become an essential part of the team. And then one day, Karen asked him to join her for coffee. David was stunned. The CEO wanted to chat with him. It felt surreal, like a dream. As they sat down, Karen leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "You know, I've noticed a lot of changes in you, David. Your confidence has grown, and you've really started to shine." David's heart raced. Here he was, having gone from the shadows to sitting across from the CEO. "Thank you, Karen," he replied softly. With each word, he could feel the weight of his journey lifting. He thought back to that chaotic day in the server room, the sense of urgency, and how it had opened a door he never knew existed. The quiet man had learned that sometimes stepping up meant stepping into the light. As David left that coffee meeting, he did so with hope and excitement. He felt ready for whatever came next. No longer just a silent supporter, he was a vital part of the team, and that change had come from the very moment he chose to act when things fell apart. The office buzzed around him, not just a workplace anymore, but a community, filled with stories waiting to unfold. And as the lights kept flickering above, a new chapter of David's life was just beginning. David had always been the quiet one in the office, a tech genius sitting behind a row of screens. He was the backbone of TechCorp, but hardly anyone noticed. Yet on a day like no other, that was about to change. The sudden alarm piercing through the hum of keyboard clicks sent everyone's heart racing. In the sleek, modern office with glass walls and polished floors, panic swept through the cubicles. Employees leaned over desks, whispering in hushed tones. The lights flickered ominously overhead, a sign that chaos had found its way into their world. Karen, the fierce CEO, had just called an all-hands meeting, and her normally stoic face looked troubled. The walls felt like they were closing in, but for David, the unease twisted like a knot in his stomach. Outside, a storm brewed, dark clouds rolling in, foreboding and heavy. Inside, the electric atmosphere mirrored that of a brewing tempest. David felt it, the urgency, the fear. He glanced at his screens, noting the warning signs flickering in vivid reds and yellows. The server was crashing, and as the minutes ticked by, it felt like the clock was counting down to a disaster. As Karen addressed the team, her voice sharp like glass, David watched the furrow deepen on her brow. "Listen up, we have a major issue. The presentation scheduled for tomorrow is at risk." The words struck David like a hammer. He was the one who could fix this, if only someone would look his way, acknowledge him. He could see the frantic rustling of papers, the worried looks exchanged, but no one thought to call on him. David's heart raced. He was a man of action, but in this moment he felt invisible. As the meeting droned on, David's mind flickered with solutions, a cascade of ideas spilling into place. Time was running out, and he felt an invisible tug pulling him toward the server room. It was a tiny space, unassuming and overlooked, but inside it was where he thrived. As Karen wrapped up the meeting, David slipped out quietly, the tension of the gathered crowd falling behind him. The moment he stepped into the server room, a wave of calm washed over him. He inhaled deeply, the cool air mixed with the faint hum of machinery grounding him. The servers blinked like watchful eyes, and as he approached them, the familiar scent of dust and metal welcomed him. He quickly logged into the system, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. He felt energized, now fully immersed in the problem. Lines of code flashed across the screen, and with them, the clues he needed. But the clock was ticking. He could practically hear it pounding in his ears. The chaos outside faded into a distant echo. David had always excelled under pressure. As a child, he was bullied for being different, too quiet, too nerdy, but he took those experiences and turned them into fuel. Now his heart raced as he diagnosed the issue, a critical server crash. His mind began piecing together solutions as if it were a puzzle he was destined to solve. He recognized a faulty configuration causing the overload, and without hesitation he began rerouting the data. With each click and command he inputted, he edged closer to restoring order. Every second counted. He thought about the consequences if he failed. The anxiety of everyone in the office struggling to keep their heads above water fueled his motivation. He'd fix this, he had to. Suddenly he heard footsteps approaching, a high heels click, sharp and fast. David turned slightly and was taken aback to find Karen standing at the door, her expression shifting from worry to curiosity. She watched him, arms crossed, the bold woman commanding attention even in the small space. She asked, her voice steady but edged with urgency. David faced her, his palms slick against the keyboard. "I'm working on it, just a server issue that I'm resolving." Karen's brow furrowed. Unlike the other employees who often dimmed at her presence, David felt a surge of adrenaline. She pressed, stepping closer, her curiosity evident. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Did she really care? But he pushed it aside. "No, I just need a moment." For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just a cog in the machine. He was under the spotlight and he had to shine. As her gaze lingered, David returned his focus to the screen. The tension built, his fingers flying over the keys, heart racing, thoughts narrowing to just the problem at hand. He could sense her watching and he didn't want to let her down. Minutes felt like hours. He needed this to work. As he punched in the final command, the screens flickered, holding their breath just like he was. The room was silent, a tense standoff with the unknown. And then it happened. The server hummed back to life, lights glowing green like stars igniting in the night sky. David exclaimed, a rush of relief flooding over him. He turned to Karen, heart pounding. Karen's tense shoulders relaxed, and while the world outside still buzzed with chaos, her expression shifted to one of disbelief. It was a mix of gratitude and respect he had longed for. "Impressive, David," she said, an unexpected softness in her tone. Before he could respond, the door swung open behind them. An avalanche of frantic coworkers spilled in, their anxious faces lighting up with hope. One of them shouted, rushing forward. As they crowded around him, applause erupted. He could hardly believe it. The anxiety that had filled the room moments earlier washed away, replaced by an atmosphere of celebration. In the blur of excitement, David disappeared into the back, blending into the tapestry of momentum they had created. Then came an unexpected twist. As people chatted and laughed, Karen stepped aside with him, her presence commanding the space. "I didn't know you had that in you," she said, a new spark igniting in her eyes, something warm and unexpected. David felt his chest swell with a mix of pride and confusion. "I just knew what to do," he replied. She continued, a grin creeping onto her face. His breath caught lead. David had always preferred being in the background, but something ignited at her words, a flicker of ambition he hadn't fully acknowledged before. "I'd love to," he finally said, unable to hide the excitement in his voice. "Great, let's get everyone ready for tomorrow," she said, her face brightening. As the buzz returned, David felt it settle around him, an acceptance he had never fully accepted. The storm outside continued to churn, but inside, David felt a newfound strength. He had found his voice, his place, in a world he'd often felt excluded from. Over the following days, the momentum didn't stop. The project gears turned, but they turned with him at the helm, fostering a sense of camaraderie he had wished for. He filled his roles, leading meetings, brainstorming strategies, and guiding his teammates through challenges. The whispers of doubt that once hung around him dissipated, but then came the day of the big presentation. David walked into the room filled with energy and nerves. Colleagues filled their seats, eyes focused on him. The stakes were high, and David felt the weight of their expectations heavy on him. Looking at Karen sitting up front, he took a deep breath. He remembered the chaos of that day, the storm, the panic, and finally the victory. He felt empowered. "We'll walk through our project and the solutions we've developed," he began, confidence tinging his words like the sunlight breaking through the clouds. He engaged the audience, his passion pouring into the presentation. He could see them captivated, mirroring back the excitement he felt. After each successful segment, applause followed. People were leaning forward, eyes sparkling, admiration in every gaze. Perhaps they weren't just seeing the work he had put in, but the person he had become. At the end of the presentation, Karen stood and clapped, smiling widely. The room filled with supportive cheers, and for a second he stood there, a smile plastered across his face, soaking in every moment. A brief moment of silence followed, and David's heart pounded louder than ever. Karen approached him, her eyes holding a mix of admiration and something deeper. "I'm proud of you," she said simply, her tone sincere. Underneath the glowing praise, David felt a shift inside him. He was no longer just David from the server room, he was a part of something bigger. He was part of a team. For the first time, he truly believed it. Days turned into weeks, and while challenges came their way, they faced them together, learning, growing, and supporting one another. David's confidence soared not because he had fixed a server, but because he had embraced who he was. And as the seasons changed outside, David knew that he wasn't just in a job anymore. He had forged connections, built rapport, and most importantly, found his voice. The storm that had once filled him with dread now transformed into the wind at his back, pushing him forward into the bright future ahead. Because in that tiny server room, so much more than technology had been restored. A sense of belonging had taken root, and it felt like home. David sat at his desk, surrounded by the low hum of computers and the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. The office buzzed with energy. It's what you'd expect for a technology startup on the rise. But today, something felt different. Something felt off. As he scanned the room filled with coworkers, each lost in their own world, a sudden blaring sound sliced through the usual office noise. It was the emergency alarm, a cacophony that sent everyone's heart rate skyrocketing. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, illuminating faces twisted in confusion. Karen, the CEO, commanded, her voice sharp and clear. All eyes turned toward her, brows furrowed, worry creeping into each expression. David's heart sank. Emergency meetings often meant trouble, big trouble. The kind of trouble that could turn a normal day into chaos. He quickly glanced at the screen in front of him while the last frayed threads of comm unraveled. The server was struggling. He could sense it. The indicators flashed in painful red, warning that something was very wrong. Deep down, David knew that while the others rushed to the meeting, he had to intervene. As he stood up, the chaos outside faded, and with sudden clarity, he felt a pull toward the server room. The escape from uncertainty, the refuge within a world of circuits and codes beckoned him. He slipped away unnoticed, his footsteps quiet against the polished floor. Inside the server room, the familiar feel of cool air and the soft whir of machines wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. This was David's world, a sanctuary of technology where he felt powerful, as though he held the strings of fate in his hands. He quickly logged into the system, heart pounding, fingers flying over the keyboard. Time felt like quicksand, and every second mattered. The room was saturated with tension, and he could feel the stakes rising. If he didn't solve this now, there would be consequences, missed deadlines, frustrated clients, and possibly even layoffs. As he navigated through lines of code, David's mind laser-focused on the problem. A critical server appeared to be overloaded, with incoming requests spiking dramatically. Panic sprawled outside, but in here he felt a wave of determination swell. He attacked the issue with the tenacity of a warrior heading into battle. His fingers danced over the keys as algorithms unfolded. Each keystroke echoed like a heartbeat in the silence, his confidence growing like a flame fed by the urgency around him. With every passing moment, he pieced together the solution, reverting settings and reallocating resources. He could already picture the tangible relief in his coworkers' eyes, the same faces that often overlooked his hard work, now just a breath away from either celebration or despair. Just then he heard the click of high heels echoing against the tiles, sharp and direct. Karen stepped into the room, her presence commanding the atmosphere. She asked, the edge of concern evident in her voice. Her gaze, intense and scrutinizing, locked onto him. David took a deep breath. "The server is crashing," he explained, his voice steady despite the storm swirling inside him. "I'm in the process of fixing it." She stepped closer, her arms crossing, watching intently as he worked. The familiarity of playing the silent tech guru faded, the spotlight had shifted to him. The weight of expectation bore down on his shoulders, but strangely it invigorated him. He could be more than just the background tech guy. He had a chance to prove himself. With a steely focus, he continued. Karen nodded silently, observing him carefully. In that moment, David felt more vulnerable than he'd ever felt, but also stronger. This was his chance. He embraced the pressure and channeled it into his work. He could fix this. Minutes ticked away, each one blending into the next like the rapid clicks of his fingers. Suddenly, screens flickered, the server rebooting with a soft whir. The lights above brightened, illuminating his face. He held his breath, praying that he hadn't miscalculated. The monitors blinked, displaying green indicator success. David exhaled, a rush of relief flooding over him. He shouted, turning toward Karen with newfound fire in his eyes. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, the tension in the air crackling as she took in the scene. Then a smile broke across her face, a mix of surprise and gratitude. Before David could respond, a group of employees burst into the room. Their expressions flickered between anxiety and hope, catching a glimpse of the revived machines. They exclaimed, disbelief and joy lighting their faces. Suddenly, the once quiet server room transformed into a hub of excitement. Laughter bubbled up and high fives began to fly. It was infectious. Together, they celebrated the victory of resilience over panic. David reveled in their appreciation, the warmth washing over him, but something deeper shifted. Amid the elation, David felt a flicker of belonging, a thread tying him to his coworkers that had never quite been there before. They were no longer just colleagues, they were a team, and he was a part of that team. As the crowd began to disperse, Karen approached David again, but this time there was a spark in her eyes. "I'd like to have a word with you later," she said, her tone lighter, more casual, but the underlying intensity still simmered. "Of course," he replied, a hint of confusion mixed with curiosity surfacing in his mind. What could she possibly want? After a few hours of wrapping up the bustling day, David felt a mix of adrenaline and fatigue. The chaos had subsided, and the office buzz transformed into a hum of productivity. He wandered back to his desk, still riding the high of gratitude from his peers. Finally, Karen appeared at his doorway, a sense of purpose in her stride. "Absolutely," David answered, pushing aside the papers strewn across his desk. With a renewed sense of confidence, he sat down, facing her. "I wanted to talk about what happened today," she began, her tone more reflective. "You saved us, David. Your quick thinking kept the project on track." David felt a warmth at her words, the recognition he had craved but never sought. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied humbly, though deep down, pride surged through him. "I want you to lead the tech team on this project going forward," she said bluntly. "Not just as a tech guru, but as someone who's part of the decision-making process." The words hit him like a wave. David had always been the one quietly working in the shadows, rarely stepping forward, but as he looked into her eyes, he felt a sense of possibility. "I'd love to," he said, forging the breaking dam of his uncertainties. A smile crept across Karen's face, the kind that sparked recognition of true potential. "Great, we'll set up some meetings and get everyone on board." "I see a leader in you, David." As the weeks went by, David settled into his new role. The days brimmed with energy as he and his team collaborated, sharing thoughts and exploring new ideas. He found his voice blossoming, confidence weaving in and out of their discussions, igniting new initiatives and encouraging creativity. The office transformed from a bustling hive of chaos into a unified team working toward a common goal. Together, they tackled challenges, no longer alone in their own corners, but standing shoulder to shoulder, innovating and pushing boundaries. David felt a new sense of belonging, a fresh identity emerging as a leader. The project grew roots, branching out like a tree reaching for the sky. So much was accomplished, and as he looked over the achievements, he reveled in the changes that blossomed around him. Then came the day of the big presentation, a culmination of weeks of hard work and collaboration. The room filled with anticipation, team members gathered to cheer each other on, a palpable excitement buzzing in the air. David took a deep breath, heart pumping as he prepared to address the room. He stepped forward, a wave of nerves coursing through him, but he banished them down deep. "It's been a journey to get here," he began, voice steady and clear. As he spoke, David could see the pride reflected on his coworkers' faces. The camaraderie had blossomed into a vibrant tapestry woven by their shared experiences. Each word he uttered was bolstered by the support surrounding him, lifting him higher. "I'm grateful for this team and the trust we've built." A resounding applause erupted around the room, echoing the collective spirit that had grown stronger. When David finished, Karen stood up, her expression filled with pride and admiration. "This journey we've taken is a testament to what real teamwork can accomplish," she declared. Even now, David marveled at how far he had come from the quiet guy behind the server to a voice that inspired his colleagues. It was more than just fixing a server. He had discovered the courage to step into the spotlight. Later that evening, as the sun dipped beneath the skyline, painting the world in gold, David strolled along the streets near the office. He took a moment to soak in everything that had happened. He had forged connections, unearthed potential, and together he and his team had risen from the chaos of an office in distress to become a thriving force. And as the soft twilight settled down, David felt that flicker of uncertainty transform into an unshakable belief. He belonged here, and this was just the beginning. David sat at his desk, fingers flying over the keyboard as he navigated through lines of code, when suddenly the office lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A heartbeat later, emergency alarms blared, reverberating through the silent chaos. Karen, the CEO, shouted as she pushed her way through the door, the hasty clacking of her heels echoing against the now dim walls. Staff members glanced around, uncertainty etched on their faces. The usual buzz of the office transformed into a cacophony of confusion, and David's heart raced. He turned quickly back to his dual monitors, the glow illuminating his features like a candle in a storm. Panic bubbled up, but deep down he felt a familiar sense of duty. David was the system's administrator. Fixing problems was his job, no matter how monumental. The alarm seemed to amplify the chaos around him. Tech staff scrambled to check their machines, phones rang unanswered, and a palpable sense of urgency radiated from Karen as she rallied the team. She ordered, her voice sharp, but David wasn't going to wait for that. He could already see the signs. A power surge could have knocked out the server, and if they didn't act quickly, they would lose critical data. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. He slid out of his chair, determination propelling him toward the server room, a small, often unnoticed space tucked away in a corner. As he approached, the door creaked open, revealing a labyrinth of blinking lights and humming machinery. Inside the cool, dark room, the servers stood like stalwart guardians, ready for action. David took a deep breath, steeling his mind for the task ahead. Fingers moving with precision, he logged into the main system. "Let's do this," he muttered, eyeing the chaotic streams of data flashing across the screens. In the time it took for the lights to go out, a crisis had erupted. There was no time to waste. The stakes felt impossibly high. An outage like this could mean losing a client, a disaster in the competitive tech landscape. With shining resolve, he dove into diagnostics. His hands moved swiftly, tracing the culprits that had caused the chaos. There was a knock at the door, and before he could respond, Karen stepped into the server room. She demanded, scanning the screens, her expression a mix of urgency and weariness. "I'm working on fixing the server issue. There's a power surge, our systems are overloaded," he replied, keeping his focus on the task at hand. Karen watched him closely, her arms crossed, eyebrows furrowed as she assessed the situation. "Can you get it back online?" Her voice rang with expectation. David felt the weight of not just the company's future on his shoulders, but a chance to prove his worth. "Yes," he said, tension edging his tone. There was something about her presence that ignited a fire within him. He'd always been the quiet guy who worked in the shadows, a tech wizard who solved problems without much fanfare. But here, in this high-stakes moment, he felt the call of leadership. The clashing alarms faded into a distant hum as David focused, hands dancing over the keyboard like a maestro conducting an orchestra. After a frantic few minutes, he saw it, the source of the failure. A crucial server was knocked offline, but with a series of quick commands, he started the reboot. Come on," he whispered, eyes locked on the monitors. The seconds stretched on like hours as he willed the system back to life. Finally, one by one, the indicators turned green. The screen lit up, a wave of relief rushing through him like thunder. He exclaimed, turning to Karen, who stood wide-eyed, a weight lifting from her shoulders. For a moment, everything hung in the balance, the storm of uncertainty, the roar of victory. Then the lights above flickered to life, bathing the room in bright illumination. He felt the adrenaline drain away, replaced by satisfaction. David had saved the day. A rush of voices spilled in as staff members poured into the room, relief spreading across their faces. One of them shouted, applause breaking out like fireworks, but David hardly heard them. He was far too engrossed in the aftermath of his own triumph. Karen stepped forward, her expression shifting. "Incredible work, David. I didn't know you could pull something like that off," she said, a genuine smile breaking through her professional demeanor. "Thanks, but it was a team effort getting everything back together," he replied, humility guiding his words. As the group began to celebrate, David felt the warmth of camaraderie wrap around him like a blanket. This was the recognition he had quietly longed for. It was surreal. He had always been the technician who faded into the background, but now he was at the forefront. Once the immediate panic dissipated, Karen pulled him aside, her gaze softer now. "Sure," he said, curiosity piquing. "Listen, I've seen how you handle pressure. Today was remarkable. I want to explore more opportunities for you within this company," she said, her voice steady and serious. David blinked, the unexpected weight of her words settling in. Yes, your skills go beyond just fixing systems. You have a way of getting things done even when everyone else is losing their heads." Raced, this offer carried a weight he hadn't anticipated, but deep down it ignited a spark he had long denied. "I'd love to, but I'm still figuring a lot out," he admitted, vulnerability creeping in. "We all are, David, but I've seen that you have what it takes. Trust yourself, you won't be alone, we'll grow together," she replied, unwavering and supportive. A sense of determination surged within him. Okay, with that agreement set in motion, David dove headfirst into this new role. Meetings transformed from chaotic gatherings into strategic sessions brimming with ideas. The energy shifted, his quiet nature began to resonate with the team around him. His colleagues, who had once barely noticed him, began to seek his input, cherishing his thoughts as they would a priceless gem. Day by day, he navigated challenges, each obstacle becoming an opportunity for growth. He pored over training manuals, explored new software, and brought innovative ideas to life. The doubts that had once plagued him began to dissolve, replaced by a cadre of allies, people who genuinely appreciated his contributions. However, the road ahead was not without its hurdles. One afternoon, a crippling wave of panic swept through the team. A critical software program was malfunctioning, a major setback just weeks before the deadline. A colleague asked, fear lacing their voice. David took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility pressing on him anew. "Let's break this down together. We can work through this one step at a time," he replied, his voice fortifying theirs. He led the team in a brainstorming session, taking charge with a newfound confidence. They pored over logs, analyzing problematic sections of code, and identified where things had gone off track. Just as they were about to lose hope, David furrowed his brow, spotting the issue, a small oversight buried in the complexity of the software. He exclaimed, the revelation lighting up his face. As they implemented the fix, David felt the room buzz with anticipation. Moments later, the software came back online, functioning smoothly and efficiently. The air erupted with cheers, their relief palpable and infectious. "Great job, everyone," he waved a hand, feeling a wave of pride wash over him. But more than the victory, David saw something shift in himself. No longer did he see his quietness as a weakness, it had become a distinct advantage. He listened, observed, and understood his team on a deeper level. Weeks turned into months, and with each project completed, he grew bolder. The once reticent man began to embrace the spotlight, sharing knowledge and encouragement with those around him. The dynamic of the office shifted. They were trickling with innovation and excitement. One autumn afternoon, during a celebratory gathering for the successful launch of a new product, David stood before the team, a mix of exhilaration and gratitude bubbling within him. "I just want to say thank you," he began, catching the glimmer of their eyes. "This has been a journey I never could have imagined." Karen nodded, pride lighting up her face from across the room. "I knew the moment I saw David that he was capable of leading this team." "You've come so far, and your growth has been an inspiration to all of us," she added, her voice firm and genuine. Tears of joy threatened to spill out as David felt warmth envelop him. He glanced around, taking in the faces of friends, mentors, and supporters, the same people who had once overlooked him. They were now part of something bigger, a community forged in resilience and shared ambitions. After the celebration, David stepped out onto the balcony, the crisp fall air filling his lungs. He could see the city skyline glittering under the evening stars. As he savored the moment, he realized how much had changed in such a short time. The journey from the quiet tech guy to confident leader felt surreal. Then he noticed Karen approaching, her expression poised yet warm. "I wanted to thank you personally for the incredible work you've done," she said, leaning against the rail beside him. "Honestly, I couldn't have done it without the support of the team and you," David replied, his sincerity blossoming. She smiled, and for a brief moment the two exchanged silent understanding. "That's what leadership is all about," she remarked. With each passing day, David would embrace that mission, mentoring, supporting, and inspiring those around him to reach their potential. As winter began its descent, blanketing the city in cold, he reflected on all that had unfolded: the panic, the pressure, the profound sense of belonging he had cultivated. He looked back at the flickering server lights that had once represented chaos, now fond reminders of triumph. In those moments of transformation, he realized how courage, kindness, and the willingness to step outside one's comfort zone had forged his path. He had ventured from the shadows, not merely fixing servers, but building bridges and creating lasting connections. With renewed determination, he stepped back inside, the warmth of the office welcoming him like an embrace. He could feel the beating heart of the place, a lively testament to collaboration and growth, his place in it now firmly established. As he walked back to his desk, David understood one undeniable truth. He hadn't just fixed the server that day. He discovered in himself the spirit of leadership, the strength of community, and the transformative power of believing in one another. With those qualities guiding him, the future was bright, and he knew their journey was only just beginning. David was sitting at his desk, immersed in another long day of work when it happened, a sudden jolt that shook the office. The flickering lights danced ominously, then went out entirely, leaving the room in darkness save for the weak glow of computer screens. A panicked murmur spread through the cubicles as an alarm blared overhead, piercing through the usual rhythm of clicks and conversations. "Everyone to the conference room," Karen, the commanding CEO, shouted, her tone sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Employees hurriedly glanced at each other, confusion mingling with fear as they obeyed her call. But David hesitated. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, the unmistakable sensation that something was going wrong. The flashing lights had triggered a warning deep inside him, sending his mind racing. He knew enough to sense that this was no ordinary outage. He slid out of his chair, urgency propelling him forward. The server room awaited him, nesting in the shadows of the office, often dismissed by everyone but him. As he pushed through the door, the familiar cool air enveloped him, the faint hum of machines calming his racing heart. This was his territory. This was where he could fix things. David didn't waste a moment. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he logged into the system, the screen lighting up with a cascade of warnings. "Come on," he whispered, his heart pounding like a drum. The alarms outside faded into a dull roar as he focused inward, navigating through the labyrinth of data flashing before his eyes. In just moments he found the problem. The server had crashed under an unexpected load. He could practically hear the clock ticking down, counting off the precious moments of stability. This was a critical situation. If he didn't repair it fast, the company risked losing vital connections with clients. Lifting his chin, he embraced the challenge. The office was still buzzing with anxiety beyond the door, but here he felt a surge of concentration, a connection to the machines around him. He typed commands like a musician playing a symphony, every keystroke moving him closer to restoring order. Through the chaos beyond the server room, David was drawn into the rhythm of fixing in a world filled with problems. He had found his calling. With each command executed, the tension in him eased slightly, replaced by a quiet confidence. But just as he was about to execute the final command, the door swung open. Karen stepped in, her eyes scanning the screens with a mix of urgency and fierce determination. She demanded, her voice filled with authority. "Working on getting the server back up. Should only take a few more minutes," he replied, a steadiness coiling through him like a strong rope. She asked, avoiding the usual formalities, her focus razor-sharp. "It is. It's down much longer, we risk data loss," he said, locking eyes with her. The gravity of the moment wrapped around them like a cloak, and for the first time David felt the weight of his position. With a nod, Karen leaned closer, watching him intently. Something shifted in the air, no longer just a meeting of a tech employee and the CEO. This felt like a partnership in crisis. David's determination solidified, guiding him to press forward. As the minutes ticked by, adrenaline coursed through him. Each second felt like a small eternity. With a final stroke, he executed the reboot. The screens flickered, the machines whirred, and he held his breath. Finally, they greeted him with bright green light success. He exclaimed, a wave of relief washing over him. It wasn't just the server that had risen from the dead, it felt like he had as well. The moment was fleeting but powerful as Karen's expression shifted from anxiety to respect. You did that quickly. Well done, David, she said, a rare spark of admiration lighting her eyes. Before he could respond, they were joined by a flood of employees rushing into the room, their expressions shifting from panic to hope. One shouted, the applause erupting like a victorious anthem. They were about to fall apart without you, another added. Pats on the back and high fives became part of the scene as David stood at the center of their admiration. For years he had inhabited the background, quietly solving problems, but now the respect felt like a tangible force creating ripples through the room. He soaked in the accolades, but something clicked inside. This wasn't just about fixing a machine, it was about community, and they were a team. With chaos settling, Karen pulled David aside, a newfound enthusiasm radiating from her. We need to talk, she said. David asked, his heart racing again, this time with curiosity. I want you to take on more responsibility, lead the tech team for our upcoming project, she said, her eyes unwavering. David's breath caught. Lead, the quiet tech guy who fixed servers. I appreciate that, but I'm still learning, he stammered. Exactly, we're all learning, but I've seen how you handle pressure. You did something remarkable today. People trust you, she replied, her confidence sparking the fire of belief within him. After that conversation, his world shifted dramatically. He dove headfirst into his new role, transforming the dynamics of the team. No longer was he just the guy fixing problems, he was now the guy solving them before they even appeared. Meetings shifted from chaotic gatherings to collaborative sessions, each filled with ideas and innovative strategies. David felt the gears of change turning, the energy building as his colleagues began to lean into their strengths. They shared ideas, challenges, and triumphs, transforming the atmosphere into one of support and respect. However, the growth came with its share of challenges. One day, the team faced a roadblock, a significant software malfunction days before a major deadline. Anxiety crackled through the office like electricity, casting shadows on David's newfound confidence. A voice trembled from the back. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. We can handle this. Let's break it down. A quiet fire ignited within him, guiding his voice. They began the brainstorming process, working diligently through the logs and code, analyzing the pieces meticulously until David finally discovered the flaw, a small error hiding in a mountain of data. There, he announced, unleashing a wave of energy throughout the room. With the fix in place, everyone worked together, implementing the changes needed. As the program came back online, cheers erupted, gratitude filling the room like a warm breeze on a chilly day. David exclaimed, the cheers rekindling a sense of unity within him. No longer did he feel like just a cog in the machine. He was a leader, a friend, someone who mattered. Weeks passed, and with every challenge faced, David infused lessons learned, cultivating a culture of collaboration. People once drawn into their own silos began reaching out, sharing insights and expertise. One fateful day, Karen approached him as they stood together by the coffee machine. You've really transformed things around here, David. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice sincere. Thank you, he replied, feeling a swell of pride. I couldn't have done it without the team. Yes, but you're the glue holding it all together, Karen responded as her eyes sparkled with appreciation. Yet, in those moments, something unexpected stirred within him. David recognized not just the respect he garnered from others, but a growing sense of self-worth. As he stood there alongside Karen, he felt more like himself than ever. The team continued to thrive, launching new projects and supporting one another every step of the way. When it was time for the big presentation, excitement filled the air. David stood before the team, heart racing. This has been an incredible journey, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've achieved together, he began, locking eyes with familiar faces, each filled with anticipation. Cheers of encouragement filled the room, and with each sentence he spoke, David felt his confidence multiplying. They were bound together, a family built on trust, innovation, and a shared mission. The launch was a success, and as applause rang in his ears, David knew he had come a long way from the quiet operator tucked away in a corner. No longer just a fixer of servers, he had become a builder of dreams. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, David reflected on the twists and turns that had brought him here. Each moment contained a thread, weaving a narrative that shaped not only his professional identity, but also his personal growth. In quiet moments, he often thought back to that day, the flickering lights, the chaos erupting around him, and how he had transformed into that beacon of stability. The challenges had fueled him, igniting the kind of tenacity that he never knew he possessed. And as he gazed out at the city skyline from his office window, the sun setting in hues of gold, he understood that he hadn't just mended a server that day. He had built a bridge to a brighter future for himself and for everyone around him. With newfound clarity and purpose, David stepped forward into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next. The quiet tech guy had found his voice, and it echoed loudly within the halls of the company he now proudly called home. David was lost in his code when the power surged a sudden flicker that ran through the office like a bolt of lightning. Moments later, the lights dimmed, alarms blared, and panic erupted. The fluorescent bulbs above buzzed ominously, casting shadows on the faces of his bewildered coworkers. "Stay calm," Karen, the CEO, commanded, her voice cutting through the clamor. Employees rushed, their footsteps echoing in the hallways, but David hesitated. Deep down, he felt a storm brewing, not just outside, but in the realm of technology he managed. He shot a glance at his dual monitors, where error messages began to pile up like an avalanche. A tight knot formed in his stomach. He knew what this meant. If the servers crashed, they'd lose precious data and clients' trust. Gathering his resolve, he rose from his desk, bolting toward the server room, his heart pounding in rhythm with the alarms. Stepping into the server room, he was met with the familiar hum of machinery, the cool air wrapping around him like an old friend. This was his domain, a sanctuary where he could turn chaos into order. Each server stood before him, an army of machines waiting for instructions. He had one goal: restore power before the situation spiraled further out of control. David quickly logged into the primary server and was greeted by a chaotic mess of red error messages flashing across the screen. He could feel the weight of the company resting on his shoulders. With every keystroke, the tension in his chest tightened. He typed furiously, poring over the data logs, searching for clues in the chaos. He noticed it almost immediately, a configuration error that could easily be corrected, but there was no time to waste. Seconds felt like minutes, and the world outside the server room spiraled into a frenzy. Panic wasn't just in the air, it was palpable, a living thing that clawed at the edges of his mind. He murmured, sweat forming at his brow as he navigated through the labyrinth of code. Could almost hear the clock ticking down. Each blink of the screen was a reminder that time was not on his side. Suddenly, the door swung open, and to his surprise, Karen stepped inside. She asked, urgency lacing her words. Her fierce determination mirrored David's inner resolve. He met her gaze, feeling exposed but strangely empowered. "I'm fixing the issue, but if we don't get it back online soon, we risk losing everything." She nodded, arms crossed, studying him intently. "I get it, just don't take too long," she urged, leaning slightly closer as if her trust in him could somehow transfer through the space between them. The intensity of the moment solidified his focus. No longer was this just a tech crisis. This was a chance to prove himself. He was not just a silent worker behind the scenes anymore. He felt a surge of adrenaline as he dived deeper into the digital chaos. Finally, he spotted the error in the configuration, a false setting that had caused the servers to overload. With a determined click, he corrected the issue and rebooted the system. Time slowed around him as he held his breath. The screens flickered, held their breath, and then green lights blossomed like flowers in spring. He shouted, a wave of relief crashing over him. The server warbled back to life, and for a moment the cacophony of alarms faded into the background. David turned to Karen, who began to smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. She said, and just like that, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. Before he could bask in the victory, the door swung open again, and a group of employees flanked the entrance, their faces shifting from worry to hope, then joy as they realized the crisis had passed. One of them exclaimed, the collective cheers seeming to echo in the small room. As people crowded around him, offering congratulations and pats on the back, David felt a warmth spreading within him, a sense of belonging he had never fully embraced before. He was often overlooked, spending his days behind a sea of computers, but not today, not now. Karen stepped away to gather the team for a debrief, but as she moved toward the door, she paused and turned back. "Sure," he replied, intrigued and nervous all at once. Walking beside the CEO felt surreal. He had dreamed of moments like this, but now it was happening and he had no idea what to expect. She led him to her office, a sleek, modern room with glass walls offering a view of the bustling city below. "David," she began, her voice steady, "what you did today was exceptional." His heart raced. "I just did my job. I figured it out," he replied, trying to downplay the accomplishment. "No, you didn't just figure it out. You acted under pressure and your instincts were right. I want to see more of that," she said, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. The words hung in the air and he could hardly process their weight. He couldn't hide the disbelief in his voice. "Yes, you have the skills and the insights. I want you to guide this team," she insisted, her conviction wrapping around him like a warm breeze. David took a deep breath, the possibility swirling in his mind. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for that," he admitted, vulnerability creeping in. "Everyone has doubts, David. It's what you do with them that counts. I believe in you, now," she challenged, the determination in her eyes sparking a flicker of courage within him. "Yes," he finally responded, a solid decision that surged from deep inside. Over the following weeks, David dove headfirst into his new role. The dynamics of the team began to shift. Meetings transformed from mundane tasks into vivid brainstorming sessions filled with innovative ideas. People started to seek his input, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. His colleagues were no longer just faces in the cubicles, they were allies. They shared setbacks and triumphs, and David encouraged open communication, fostering a culture where everyone had a voice. Ideas flowed freely, and the atmosphere was charged with creativity. However, the transition wasn't without its hurdles. One day, as the team worked late to meet a looming deadline, a significant glitch occurred in their project's software. An air of panic permeated the room, echoing the uncertainty that had once paralyzed him. A team member asked, her voice trembling. Facing the tension, he stood tall, feeling the trust they had placed in him. "Let's break down the problem. We've handled worse than this together. We can find a solution." His words hovered in the air, steadying the team. With a shared focus, they began working through the code, brainstorming as they went. It was the embodiment of teamwork, each person contributing their unique strengths. After an intense session of analysis, David pinpointed a minor flaw, a missing semicolon that had brought everything to a halt. "Here it is, this small fix should resolve the error," he announced, a wave of excitement washing over the group. They made the corrections, and as they executed the new code, hope filled the air. When the program ran smoothly again, cheers erupted around David. Relief flooded his veins, and for the first time, he felt the distinct difference he had made, a leader who had rallied his team through adversity. Weeks turned into months, and the team thrived under David's guidance. They launched their project successfully, and the office was alive with energy. Celebrations erupted, with laughter filling the air as they toasted to their achievements. David stood back, absorbing the moment, a far cry from the quiet tech guy he once was. During one of those celebrations, as he took a moment to reflect, Karen approached him with an approving smile. "You've transformed this team, David. Thank you, Karen." "I couldn't have done it without everyone working together," he replied, scanning the faces of his teammates who had become an extension of his family. "Still, it takes a special kind of leader to get the best out of people," she added, a serious undertone creeping in. "I've been thinking about expanding your role even further." His heart raced again, but this time it felt like an exhilarating invitation. "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. As weeks rolled on, David didn't just lead, he began to influence the entire direction of the tech department. New initiatives sprang up from the ground, blossoming like flowers in spring. His ideas were considered at a higher level. He found himself shaping strategies for the future, pushing everyone to innovate. One day, as snowy flakes danced outside the office window, Karen called a team meeting. "I want to hear from everyone about how we can push ourselves further," she said, glancing over at David. The energy in the room vibrated with excitement. They bounced ideas off each other, building on one another's thoughts and pushing the envelope further than before. David facilitated the conversation, guiding his peers as they traversed the landscape of possibilities. In that moment, surrounded by his team, he felt a surge of fulfillment wash over him. He had evolved not just as a leader, but as an individual. The quiet tech guy who had once been lost in the background had transformed into a confident influence. Eventually, the team made strides that brought them recognition. Their latest software was praised by clients and competitors alike, a testament to the hard work they had all put into it. The respect David garnered seemed to ripple through the office, inspiring other departments too. Yet there was one pivotal moment that solidified it all: a company-wide presentation to investors where David was invited to present alongside Karen. As the day approached, anxiety knotted in his stomach. He had practiced countless times, but now, standing in front of an audience of influential decision-makers caused his heart to race. As they awaited their turn, Karen leaned in, offering a reassuring smile. "Just remember, you've got this." When the time came, David took the stage next to her. The spotlight felt foreign but exhilarating. "Thank you for being here today," he began, his voice steady, kindled by purpose. As he spoke, he could feel his confidence growing, each word fueled by the passion for his work and the people beside him. The audience watched attentively, captivated by the journey that had unfolded, a journey of growth, collaboration, and triumph. When they finished, applause erupted, and David felt a swell of gratitude wash over him. He had made it. A quiet fix to a server had blossomed into a career-defining moment. As he stepped off the stage, a smile spread across his face, and he couldn't help but look over at Karen. She exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Thanks, I couldn't have done it without your support," he said, feeling an undeniable bond forming between them. As the celebration continued, David reflected on his journey, the tension of that chaotic day, the storm of uncertainty, the triumphs they had achieved, and the metamorphosis within himself. In the busy world of tech, he had found himself not just as a problem solver, but as a leader and a person worth listening to. What had propelled him forward was not merely a single success, but the connections he formed with his teammates, the belief they had in each other. With renewed determination, David stepped forward, ready to embrace the challenges yet to come. The quiet tech guy had discovered not only his voice, but the resilience to craft his path, one built on teamwork, trust, and the belief that anyone could rise to the occasion when the moment called for it. The future held endless possibilities, and he was ready to seize every single one of them. David was knee-deep in code when suddenly the world around him erupted in chaos. The flickering of fluorescent lights overhead drew his attention, a rapid blinking that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Then, without warning, the lights went out, plunging the office into a murky darkness, save for the glow of computer screens. Panic rippled through the office, alarms blaring as employees scrambled in confusion. Everyone to the conference room. Karen, the no-nonsense CEO, barked her command, eyes scanning the room for order. David's heart raced. He knew this was bad. His instincts kicked in like a finely tuned machine. Something was wrong, very wrong. He glanced at his monitors, anxiety curling in his gut as red error messages flashed ominously. The server was down, their entire network teetering on the edge of oblivion. If they didn't act fast, they could lose critical data and with it, trust from their clients. David couldn't just stand by while the storm brewed outside. He shot up from his desk, every nerve singing with urgency. In the midst of the chaos, he headed toward the server room, his sanctuary, the one place where he felt in control. As he entered, the cool air wrapped around him like a familiar embrace. The faint hum of machinery was a comforting reminder that these machines responded to him in a way that people often didn't. David wasted no time. He logged into the main server, eyes widening at the cascade of errors before him, each one a ticking time bomb. With a deep breath, he dove into the data logs, scanning for the root of the problem. Time felt like quicksand, every second pulled more tightly around him. The office outside buzzed with tension, people whispering anxiously, but in here he kept his focus laser sharp. Just as he identified the problem, a misconfiguration that had caused the network overload, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, Karen. Her presence was commanding, her arms crossed, her face taut with concern. She asked, urgency lacing her voice. "The server is down," David replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the screens. "I'm working on it." Karen leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "I can, just give me a few moments," he said, feeling that familiar knot of pressure tighten in his chest. But in that very moment, something clicked inside him. Here he was, the guy often overlooked in meetings and casual conversations, but now he had the attention of not just anyone, the CEO herself. With renewed determination, he began typing faster, fingers flying over the keys. Each command felt like the pulse of a heartbeat, each error a personal challenge. The tension thickened, each second slipping by like sand through an hourglass. For David, this was more than a job. It was a calling, a chance to prove not just to the office, but to himself. After a few heart-pounding moments, he finally pinpointed the misconfiguration. "Got it," he breathed, almost afraid to believe it. Typing the final commands, he executed the reboot. The screens flickered, everyone holding their breath in anxious anticipation. Finally, the lights blinked back to life, turning green like spring flowers unfurling to greet the sun. David shouted, an infectious wave of relief washing over him. He turned to Karen, who was staring at him in disbelief, a sliver of admiration beginning to glow in her eyes. She said, her voice filled with a tone he hadn't expected. It felt like a ray of sunlight breaking through a storm-clouded sky. The door swung open and the remaining employees charged into the server room, faces lit with joy as they realized the crisis had been averted. One exclaimed, applause erupting in the small space. For the first time, David felt weightless, caught in a flurry of camaraderie, energy surging in the room. He had saved them, but more importantly, he had proven his worth. Karen stepped closer, breaking through the jubilant crowd. She asked, and David nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside him. They stepped away from the buzzing crowd, and Karen turned to look at him seriously. "What you did today was impressive." David felt warmth spread across his cheeks. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied, trying to deflect the praise. "No, David, you didn't just react, you acted decisively and effectively. I want to explore opportunities for you to lead," she said, a glint of ambition in her eyes. His pulse quickened. The words sounded alien yet thrilling. "Exactly," she leaned in closer, almost conspiratorially. "I want to see if you can take charge of the upcoming project." A smile crept onto David's face, a spark igniting within him. "I can do that," he said, more to bolster his own confidence than to convince her. With that single decision, David's life began to change. Days turned into weeks as he delved headfirst into his new role. The dynamics within the team transformed. Meetings brimmed with energy, a shared purpose igniting their creativity. No longer were they isolated in individual tasks. They collaborated passionately, each member drawing strength from one another. Under David's guidance, people began to open up, sharing innovative ideas. They explored solutions together. He felt a sense of responsibility wash over him, but more importantly, he felt acknowledged. But growing into his new role wasn't without challenges. One late afternoon, just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, a glitch surfaced in their project's software. Panic surged through the ranks, the tension palpable. A team member anxiously asked, eyes wide. Taking a deep breath, David recognized the unyielding fear spread across the room. He could either let it consume him or rise above it. "We're going to solve this," he said firmly. "Let's break it down." As they gathered around, time became a blur. David led them methodically through the lines of code, encouraging input from everyone. The energy in the room shifted. Doubts began to dissolve as teamwork ignited their spirits. After what felt like an eternity, David finally spotted the issue, a missing line that had thrown the entire program into disarray. He shouted, excitement bubbling forth. They shifted gears quickly, implementing the fix with renewed vigor. When the program finally executed flawlessly, relief washed over them like a cool breeze after a storm. Cheers erupted as they shared high fives, laughter ringing through their workspace. One team member exclaimed, appreciation glowing in their eyes. In that moment, something profound stirred within him. He had not just aided in fixing a program, he had led a group through turmoil, solidifying their bond and boosting morale. It galvanized a movement. David stood at the center, not just a tech guru, but a true team leader. As weeks turned into months, the culture of collaboration thrived. David encouraged communication across departments. Innovative thinking became the engine of their success. It wasn't merely about one project, it was about cultivating an environment where ideas flourished. But perhaps the most pivotal moment came during a company-wide meeting. Karen called everyone together, her expression serious yet warm. A hush fell over the room as eyes shifted to David, who felt a rush of adrenaline coupled with anxiety. He stammered, his insecurities bubbling to the surface. Absolutely, Karen said, her voice unyielding. All eyes were on him as he stood there, wrestling with disbelief. Could he really do this? After days of preparation, the day finally arrived. David stood backstage, his heart racing like a drum as he stared at the sea of faces before him, investors, executives, and colleagues shimmering with anticipation. With Karen beside him, he stepped into the spotlight. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice stronger than he felt. "We've worked tirelessly to develop innovative solutions to modern challenges." With each word, he poured his passion, his narrative alive with enthusiasm. He spoke of teamwork, of the journey, and of the lessons they had all learned together. The room was transfixed, each member hanging on his every word. As he presented their groundbreaking software, he felt the energy surge around him, support radiating like a warm cocoon. When he concluded, applause erupted like a thunderstorm, filling the room with an electric buzz. He grinned widely, heart swelling with pride. Karen beamed at him, her approval palpable. Later, as the crowd dispersed, she approached with a commanding presence. "You nailed it, David." "Thank you, Karen. I appreciate your faith in me," he replied, still riding the high of success. Over the following weeks, David found himself reflecting on his rapid transformation. He had gone from a quiet tech worker tinkering in the shadows to a dynamic leader, driven by passion and supported by a sturdy team. As he stood by the window one evening, watching the sun sink behind the skyline, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. It wasn't just about the accomplishments, it was about the connections he had forged along the way. He remembered that day when chaos had ruled the office, how a simple act of courage had sparked everything that followed. And as he gazed out at the vast horizon of possibilities, David knew it was only the beginning. Each challenge faced and each victory celebrated had become part of a larger tapestry he had woven with his team. With resolve, he turned away from the window, ready to embrace whatever came next. No longer was he just the guy who quietly fixed the office server. He was a leader, a collaborator, and a source of inspiration. In a world where certainty was scarce, David found his place, fostering connections and celebrating growth each step of the way. The future was bright, and he was ready to shine. David's fingers danced across his keyboard, immersed in lines of code that felt both familiar and exhilarating. The rhythmic clicking was his only company in the sea of cubicles around him. Just another Tuesday, or so he thought, but then it happened. The lights flickered, the air humming with electric tension. In an instant, all the screens went dark, plunging the office into an eerie silence. A cold chill skated up David's spine as alarm bells blared, echoing through the hallways like a siren wailing for attention. "Everyone to the conference room," Karen, the CEO, shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. Panic erupted as employees rushed to comply, fear spreading faster than the alarm itself. David felt a strange urgency seize him. Instead of joining the fray, he turned quickly towards the server room. He knew what was coming. A failed server could mean all kinds of trouble, but what he didn't expect was the knot in his stomach tightening. As he pushed through the door to the server room, warmth enveloped him, but it did little to calm his nerves. This was his domain, yet today felt different. The muted whir of machines was suddenly deafening, and the blinking red lights screamed for attention. Come on," he muttered, logging into the primary server. The cascade of error messages swarmed across the screen like angry hornets. Every warning felt like a countdown to disaster. With laser focus, he began troubleshooting, fingers flying over the keyboard as he navigated through lines of code that suddenly seemed like an endless labyrinth. Time was of the essence, every second counted. As he delved deeper into the chaos, his palms began to sweat, heart racing. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and he glanced over his shoulder to see Karen step inside, her expression a mix of urgency and steely determination. David's stomach lurched, but he forced himself to stay focused. She asked, voice low but commanding. "The server is crashing," he replied quickly, scanning the chaos on the screen. Karen's brow furrowed, and he could see her processing the gravity of the moment. Time is not on our side. Her question carried weight, a heavy expectation that both terrified and motivated him. "I can." As she stood there, watching him work, David's heart swelled with a mix of anxiety and determination. Here he was in a high-stakes moment, the guy who had always been in the background, now being looked at as a pillar of strength. With each second that ticked by, the office buzzed with tension outside, but within this room there was a quiet resolve that settled over him. He felt the pressure morphing into focus, sharpening his instincts. Then, with a sudden jolt, the pieces fell into place. There was an operational glitch, a configuration setting that had gone awry. He shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he made the necessary adjustments. His fingers danced over the keyboard, moving with purpose and precision. The screens flickered once again, and as he executed the reboot, he held his breath. Moments felt like hours, and just when doubt began to creep in, the screens lit up, indicators flashing green. It was a sign of life, a moment of triumph. David exclaimed, turning to Karen, who looked momentarily stunned before relief washed over her features. She said, a smile breaking across her face, and in that instant, something shifted in the air. Before he could bask in the victory, the door burst open again, and a flood of staff rushed in, faces painted with anxiety. One shouted, and suddenly the tension unraveled into relief and applause. For the first time, David felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He was no longer just a quiet presence hidden behind screens. He was a hero in his own right, if only for a moment. But just as the excitement began to swell, Karen gestured for David to follow her outside, her face turning serious again. "We need to talk," she said, guiding him away from the revelry. "What you did today was impressive, David." As they stepped into the hallway, his heart raced with the weight of her praise. It was just luck. "I saw the issue and fixed it," he said, trying to deflect attention from himself. "No, you acted decisively when most people would have faltered. I want you to take a lead role in the upcoming project. You have potential that I want to see realized," she urged, her eyes locking onto his. Lead. David's heart sank and soared simultaneously. "I don't know if I'm cut out for that," he hesitated, second-guessing himself. "Everyone has doubts, but you've proven yourself today. You know the systems better than anyone. I want you to guide the team," she pressed, her voice steady, full of conviction. As her words sank in, something shifted inside him. This could be a turning point, a chance to break away from the shadows. "Okay," he finally replied, newfound determination curling his lips into a small smile. Weeks passed, and a whirlwind of change swept through the office. David, now thrust into a leadership role, was learning to navigate the murky waters of management. Meetings were filled with voices, laughter, and the occasional frustration as they tackled complex problems together. But one fateful afternoon, layers of tension crept into the atmosphere when a critical flaw was discovered in the project's code just a week before the deadline. The air was thick with anxiety as the team gathered, their hearts heavy with the weight of potential failure. A teammate nervously asked, "Let's break it down," he said, trying to inject a sense of calmness into the moment. "We'll solve this together." He felt their eyes on him, trust mixed with fear, and he couldn't falter. As they dove into the problem, the minutes ticked away and frustration danced in the air. David paced back and forth, brainstorming out loud, trying to shed light on the dark corners of confusion. When he spotted it, a missing line in the code relief washed over him like a tidal wave. He exclaimed, the victory palpable. The team rallied around him, implementing the change and executing the code. They watched, breaths held tight in their chests, as the program ran smoothly once more, applause erupting in the room. Despite the gloom that had hung heavy just moments before, laughter paved the way for a lighter atmosphere. As the celebration subsided, David felt a growing sense of belonging. This was more than just a job, it was a community. The bonds he forged with his teammates filled the cracks in his insecurities. Amid the newfound camaraderie, he began to believe in himself more than ever before. Yet the real test came one evening when the office remained hushed, everyone focused on their screens, working late to meet project deadlines. David was reviewing the presentation he would lead the next day when a sudden, sharp alarm cut through the silence. Instinctively, he rushed to the server room with a sinking feeling in his gut. When he arrived, he was met with a nightmare unfolding before him. The servers were down again, their screens flickering ominously. In disbelief, he frantically typed in commands. He shouted, panic clawing at his throat. Time stretched thin as he realized something far worse was at play. Not only were the servers down, but they were also under attack, a cyber breach. His heart raced as he worked to regain control, fingers flying as he initiated security protocols. He was painfully aware that any miscalculation could cost them everything. His mind raced, recalling the training sessions about how to respond to cyber threats. With each heartbeat, adrenaline surged. "Come on, David, you can do this," he whispered to himself. Outside the server room, he could hear his team in hushed conversations, sensing the urgency in the air. A voice called out, but he was too absorbed to respond. He deployed countermeasures, fighting to protect their network. Just as he thought he had it under control, the system jolted again, another wave of intrusion hitting like a runaway train. Panic rose in his throat. He could almost feel his heart pounding in his ears. Then he heard footsteps. Karen stormed in, her face paler than usual. "What's happening?" "Yes, but I'm working on it," he replied, determination piercing through his fear. Still, he felt the weight of her gaze, the pressure of expectations resting heavily on his shoulders. "Do whatever you have to do to stop this," she insisted, her eyes intense, reflecting the urgency of the moment. David refocused, realizing this wasn't the time for doubt. Each command felt like a life-or-death decision as he tightened his grip on the keyboard. The tension began to mount, pushing against him like a storm closing in. Minutes dripped away like molten metal, every second stretching out in a painful silence. His pulse quickened. Their situation was worsening. He looked at Karen, who was standing behind him, her expression a mix of concern and fierce determination. "I need a backup plan," he said, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily on his shoulders. "Get in touch with IT support. We need everyone, and we need them now," Karen commanded, her voice cutting through the din of uncertainty. David nodded, reaching for his phone. As he dialed, the world around him faded into the background. He could almost hear the clock ticking louder now, time slipping away. "Hello?" he asked as the line connected. Time felt like it had come to a standstill, but the stakes had never been higher. He could feel it, the weight of every decision falling squarely on him. "Listen, we're facing a serious threat right now. You need to guide me through this," he said, each word feeling weightier than the last. A desperate gasp caught in his throat as he realized that, despite everything, this was the moment that would define him. And as he urgently collaborated with it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was lurking beyond the surface, ready to make its move. Would he be able to stop it before it was too late? The air crackled with uncertainty, and as the grip of the unknown tightened, he knew the battle was only just beginning.